All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Will the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, January 3rd, 2018, please come to order. Happy New Year, everyone. All right. So I'd like to start the meeting, before I read this, with reciting the pledge. If anybody would like to join me, please do. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Josh made it. He's in. All right. Yes. No, it was. So for the benefit of those who may or may not have participated in a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our procedures are as follows. 1, we will read the legal call of the meeting as published in local newspapers. 2, the applicant will be invited to come forward and present the case, explaining to the commissioners and others present what's being requested of the property. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. 3, there will be a clarifying question from the commissioners. 4, then there will be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. 5, first, those who wish to support the application may come forward. And second, those who oppose the application will be invited to come forward and express their opinion. As this is a public hearing, it must be recorded. It's necessary for speakers to identify themselves by stating their name and address before addressing this commission. The applicant is then free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearing and the regular meeting, at which time the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has a right to appeal in Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Office at 203-453-8039 after 9 a.m. So tonight we have the following members are going to be seated. We have Phil Johnson, we have Rich Meyer, Alan Brown, Josh Hirschman, I'm Frank DeAndrea, and Dick Wallace. Our staff tonight, we have George Kroll, we have Lisa Piambino, and the videographer is Peter Schultz. So will the secretary, Mr. Wallace, please read the notice.
Mr. Chairman, we have no items to notice for tonight's meeting.
All right, so let's go in. Let's dive into this public hearing. We have the second public hearing on Mara Weissman, 117 Andrews Road.
Okay, for the record, I'm Mark Young. I'm a land surveyor with Waldo Associates, representing Rich and Mara Weissman on this project. Just to bring you back up to speed, I'm sure you all remember, this is down towards the end of Andrews Road. The new house has been constructed here. Little Harbor is here. The proposal is for an array of solar photoelectric panels in this area. It's fully conforming with the rear setback, the setback from the coastal resource, and it's screened by a row of evergreens along the top of the bank. We feel this is the least intrusive location on the site for the panel, and conforms with all the regulations, and will have no adverse effect on the coastal resources. Mr. Bennett,
Yeah, I'm John Bennett. I'm an attorney from Essex. I represent Mara Weissman. The Weissmans couldn't be here tonight. They asked me to come largely to answer any questions that you have. I would only add to this presentation, aside from the practical considerations, that this is going to be downslope and behind a row of evergreens which are in place, and therefore protected from or blocked from view. Your regulations and the state statute that we're contemplating here has to do with view corridors, and that's what your regulations talk about. That's what the state statute talks about. And since I guess I get hired to do this, I would simply cite one case, which is Bryan versus Branford, where the local Planning and Zoning Commission was confronted with a similar circumstance. And the important finding in that is that the court finds that the plaintiff's view across the applicant's property does not constitute a coastal resource, as the term is used in 45.4.2 of the zoning regulations, which is a similar regulation to yours, your 27391, that talks about view standards. The coastal resource, from a view perspective, is the corridor looking out toward the view, not the applicant's, the Wiseman's land in this case. So I'd be happy to comment further on that, but that's...
I got a question for you. Does the regulations that you're discussing right now, does that pertain to the view from the water towards the shore only, or at all?
I'm not sure that it does at all. I know there's a difference of opinion in the DEP based on comments at the last meeting. I watched the video of your meeting. The difficulty I find with that is twofold. First is your regulation. Second is the state statute. But more to the point, in this decision in Bryan versus Branford, the court was relying on the fact that the agency, your equivalent, the Planning and Zoning Commission, had a memorandum from the DEP, then the DEP, not the DEP, that said, it's the view away. It's not the view looking back. And that's why I offer you that, because I think it's consistent with your regulation. That's the legal technical piece.
Prior case law then would say that if the state DEP at the time said that it was only to consider the view from land towards sea,
Yeah.
that would still apply in this case because it
There's
hasn't
been
been
no
changed.
amendment to the statutes.
Right, okay.
And just from a practical perspective, on this piece of property, this is the place to put it. It's down behind the evergreens. You put it up here, and it's going to be much more visible. So.
If you put it up there, would it block potentially any view of any other adjacent property owners? In other words, by moving it there, would it possibly interfere with someone else's view, and that would be a bad thing to do?
No. No matter where it is in this site, it's not going to block anybody's view, except perhaps the owner, because the public way is over here. There's no view until you get down to the beach, and then you'd be looking out to sea. You know, the only view that you might consider is that the view of the panels itself, and that's not what the statute was intended to preserve. And you know, if you find the site of the panels offensive, well, that's not a regulated consideration. And in fact, we have considered that, and we're siting the panels behind the row of evergreens. And in fact, we'll plant further evergreens to maintain that screen.
So you're not removing any of these taller evergreens that are currently on the site?
No, none of them. It's the cedars, red pines, and so forth. We intend to save all of them.
And I would just add that you heard the discussion last time about a view easement being held by the property behind. This will be so far down the hill that they won't see it.
That's what I'm really asking you about. Is if we allow the Weissmans to put it where they want, there'll be less interference with the view of the other lot.
As I understand it, and you, I'm the wrong guy to ask, but this is only going to be a couple of feet off the ground.
Correct.
Following the slope of the slope.
Right. This is actually on just about the steepest portion of the whole yard, so that the panels will be only a couple feet above ground for their entire height.
So just a reference to the people in town, not as big as the panels over at Bishop's.
Oh, no. Maybe 1% the size.
And is that roughly the scale?
This is to scale.
Any other questions from the commission?
Did we get any follow from Carol?
Szymborski? Well, I'm not going to read that. This is, I mean, you can't just print, I mean, is there just this printout that she sent us?
Yeah, I don't think
That's what she gave us?
There was a single line.
Basically repeated.
There was an email with a single.
Kevin.
This is not getting
saying,
right in.
No comment, or?
No, I stand with what I said.
She's maintaining that, in her opinion, it would be better placed if it's further away from the coastal resource. I think she mentioned 25 feet further up this.
She wanted to, she suggested moving it 25 feet further uphill, which will put it right out in plain sight to the people looking up there from the street. It would also interfere with the landscaping scheme in the backyard.
And what was Kevin's position on that?
I don't think he had
opinion, he didn't
I
express
remember
anything.
he said that she's not aware of the changes that took place with the rocks along the shoreline, and that, in fact, in his opinion, it's better located down where the Weitzmans want it.
I think, if I may just offer, I think that, I agree with you, that was what the tape revealed, his conversation.
Yeah.
So you good?
Well, I just don't understand why we can't have our environmental analysts on the same page. I mean,
I think the view of DEP is the further away from the coastal resource it is, or any proposed activity is, the better. So she's not really taking into consideration the other issues. That's my understanding of what she's saying.
You okay? Any other questions? Pretty straightforward at this point. All right, I'm going to ask anybody from the public that would like to ask a question. Okay. Yes, please come up, name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Kristen Hawkins. I live at 2 Gate Road. We have an association which shares this beach with the Little Harbor Association. You probably remember me from last time. So my question is, did you consider other locations, such as the one we mentioned last time, up here or on the roof of this area around the pool?
Yes, we considered that. Mr. Weissman preferred this location.
He just prefers it.
Well, there's also, if I may, again, John Bennett, and I know from watching the tape, there was some discussion about this, but the fact is that there are trees here and they will be shaded. This allows them to be open, blocked because of the evergreens that are here, blocked from view. The sun gets down to them. Up here there are trees and there really is no good roof panel that allows them to have full sun. And that was the decision.
There's actually, that's not really completely true. There's a spot up here that's not shielded by trees. I would like to ask if we could have a solar panel expert provide some advice, because I think the owner's preference isn't really the driving factor here. And there's a pretty large roof area here. I'm not sure if this is completely accurate, but there's a very large roof surface here with nearly the same exact exposure as you can see on this plan.
Okay. Any other questions this time?
I have something to read, if I can read it, but I don't have
You,
more
if,
questions.
just make sure there's no more questions, then we're going to do comments for and against, and you could absolutely,
Oh, actually, I do have one more question.
sure.
Where is the line for the conduit, the electrical conduit that runs from this panel back to the electrical panel?
We haven't determined that.
It'll be underground.
It requires an 18-inch for frost, and I think last time you stated that ledge is 10 inches below the surface of the ground here. So if you can't get 18 inches down, what's the solution then?
18 inches down,
Well-
that's for a public utility, isn't
No,
it?
it's to protect the conduit from frost.
Well, I'm not an electrical expert, so I would prefer not to comment on that, but I will add that the shallow ledge is primarily in the sloping area. Certainly there is some soil up here, which could
And just for
provide
the record,
adequate cover.
this is a CAM application, so we really wouldn't have any, I mean,
And-
we wouldn't have anything we can do about that at this
My
point.
point, though, is, I mean, part of our objection is the continued destruction of this slope beyond what's already happened, and then the continued impact of more excavation for the piles for this, and more excavation for an electrical line that's got to go from this location, do you know where the electrical panel is in the house? Back to wherever that is, okay? And if it can't be 18 inches down, which is a code requirement, then it's a concrete, basically a concrete bunker that has to conceal the entire conduit
Yep.
line. So an additional excavation, an additional piece of eyesore coming from this thing somewhere along this slope. I'm surprised that's not part of the application.
Well, it's a CAM app, so.
Primarily, in my opinion, that aspect of the project is more like the landscaping, which is not specifically a coastal resource concern.
But it does impact the destruction of the slope.
Proper construction procedure would allow installation of the panels and installation of any underground conduit required in a manner which would not affect in any way, shape, or form the coastal resource.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think, you've seen all the construction that's happened there. Have you noticed any detrimental effect to the coastal resource?
Yes. quite-
What?
Quite a bit.
Really?
Well, I mean, you remember the photographs that Doug Baldwin showed last time?
It's not
Comparing what it used to look like to what it looks like.
I understand that, but I think we're concerned here primarily with the coastal resource. I mean, this isn't a debating society, but I think the entire construction is done with no damage to the coastal resource.
Oh, I think.
Okay, we got to move on from this.
Well-
So, do you have another question before we do the comments?
No.
Okay. Yes, please come up and do your name and address for the
I
record.
do
Thank
have
you.
one question.
Absolutely. And if you guys can kind of get near the mic, because that's what's picking you up on the actual camera. That's probably not. Perfect. Great.
My name is Anthony Marchese. I'm a resident of Wingate. I'm also a registered architect within the state of Connecticut. I did hear one statement that said, and I'll paraphrase, that the issue that's being considered today only considers views from the shore and the impact of the panel on those views. And I guess the question I have for you, because I don't know the answer to this, within your purview or within that which you analyze, do you at all consider the visual impacts from the water, from the beach, from the shoreline? Is it just a consideration of which blue?
What are you talking
views-
about? So, if you were in a small boat
I'm
looking
in a boat-
on into their
Yeah,
property?
If I'm on a boat, if I'm in the beach, if I'm on the road, the visual impact of that element within the coastal environment, the aesthetics of Guilford, the aesthetics of the town. And the point that that question gets to is, this is a resource for not just the town, but one could argue for the entire state. So I guess my question is, do you, in your deliberations, and maybe I address this to a town attorney that answers that specifically, do you address those issues as well at this hearing?
So I think what the applicant has said is that we shouldn't.
So then my question
Well,
is,
so,
that true?
right, is that what you said? You sort of suggested that there's case law and the statute doesn't require us.
This fellow here that said, the
Well, no,
only thing
but-
that you should consider are the views from this distance, not the views of the object itself.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay.
That's what your regulations provide, that's what the state statute provides. And if you look at the thing that was sent to you by the DEP, was mailed back to Mr. McGee, it says that the coastal management program focuses on protecting public views of statewide scenic significance. This policy is intended to protect views generally accessible to the public, even if they are on private lands but not private individual views. The types of visual resources this policy protects are national wildlife refuges, trails of national or state significance, sites of cultural or historical significance, national, state, or municipal parks, coastal public access sites, all other resources identified as outstanding scenic assets in Long Island Sound, public natural resources or public landscapes. That's not what you have here. That's what's regulated, and that's what this case talks about, that the plaintiff, the defendant's property, the applicant's property in that Branford case, is not a coastal resource.
George, do you agree with that position? Do you disagree? Do we have room there? What's your sort of opinion?
Yeah, this is a subject that's been debated significantly, whether the view from the water to the proposed development on land is in any way protected by coastal management policies and coastal management regulations. The conservative reading is that those view from the water is not protected, but I know it's a debate among planners and land use experts as to whether that is the case. So it's unequivocal.
Just relative to from the water, it was also from beach areas.
Right, I think what it is when you're looking at the actual property of the person, according to these regulations, I don't think it really implies.
Are you the town attorney? I'm sorry, Deb.
No, I'm the town planner. The most,
Okay, so who advises you guys on legal issues?
Our town attorney.
Well,
Is
the
he
town
present?
planner-
Is
He's not present.
He's not present.
The town planner.
So you just take the sole recommendation of someone else's attorney, or do
And
you
we also-
consult with your own
We
attorney?
would consult with him if it was very ambiguous, or we didn't feel that, or if we needed him. We've used him plenty of times, we're not scared to.
Got it.
So,
And
So it's at your discretion.
it's at our discretion. And also, we really do heed to the advice of the town planner on these sort of things, because he's a professional who, participated in the drafting of the resolution. And we never limit people from bringing their own attorneys to represent their point of view, or their own experts to say, oh, it could be different arrays, different positioning of the solar panels. Like, if that's, we listen to all those testimony, all that testimony. So whatever anyone would like to bring in front of us, we'll listen to it generally.
so,
Final question. So, I'm sorry, I need to ask you your name again? George, so in your opinion, your sense is that evaluating these things from the water or the shore, from an aesthetic standpoint, isn't within this group's purview, or isn't addressed by...
I think it's questionable whether it is, and I think...
Are you a Guilford resident?
Yeah, I think, I think it would have to be, in order to take into consideration the view from the water, it would have to be a pretty significant development and have a pretty significant adverse impact on the view, the landward view, since coastal, there's a lot of debate as to whether coastal management policies protect views at all. Certainly the major issue is the view of the coastal resource that's protected from public properties. That's primarily what the Planning and Zoning Commission needs to address. Is the proposed activity going to have an adverse impact on the view of the coastal resource from some public land? Usually that means the road or the street or a public park. The view of the land from Long Island Sound, or from the waters of Long Island Sound or the beaches, is it's a stretch to incorporate that in a coastal management review, in my opinion. And it would have to be a pretty major development to rise to the level where it would be considered, in my opinion.
Do you feel this is a major?
No. The house, I mean, you could certainly argue that the house is a major development, certainly had a much greater impact on the view from the water than this proposed solar panel. The house, as those of you who've seen it, is a pretty dramatic piece of property. Also a question of whether it's an adverse, whether it's negative or not. Many people would perceive it to be a positive, I would think.
Is that from the standpoint that it's creating solar power so good?
No, I didn't mean the solar panels, I meant the house. I mean, the house was subject to a coastal site plan review, which was approved by this commission.
Yep.
I mean, it's a huge house, and it's quite magnificent, I guess would one way of describing it. Monumental. The solar panels certainly have minimal impact compared to the house itself.
So one final question then. In your view, can the commission consider the impact of the entire endeavor on that site, house, additional structures, and solar point?
They've already approved the house.
Kind of determine a tipping point beyond which?
I think that would be a stretch, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay, so I would ask, anybody like to speak in favor, please come up now. Anybody that would like to make a comment against this application, please step forward. And once again, just name and address for the record. We have to do it every time we speak.
Kristen Hawkins, 2 Wingate Road, member of the Wingate Association, shares this speech. I'm also a registered architect in the state of Connecticut. So I'm just going to read this.
Sure.
And then I'll give it to you when I'm finished. So this application has been submitted for your review to determine if, and this I'm quoting from the town regulations, if the adverse impacts of the proposed activity are acceptable, and if the applicant has demonstrated that such activity is consistent with the goals and policies of the Connecticut General Statutes, Section 222A92. The Guilford Plan of Conservation and Development, which was adopted in July of 2015, states that the scenic beauty of Guilford's diverse landscape is at the heart of its character and identity. Community character means something different to everybody, but it involves a sense of place and relates to qualities that create a sense of pride in the community. It describes strategies and actions to support the preservation of Guilford's sense of place. It goes on further to say that cultural landscapes and view sheds are most often associated with creating the visual sense of place that is identifiable as Guilford. Cultural landscapes are areas including both cultural and natural resources that are associated with a historic event, activity, or person, or exhibiting other cultural or aesthetic values. In Guilford, these areas are such as the town center, where the green, the street layout, shops, and houses create an entity far more culturally valuable than any one building. These also include coastal views, where houses, beaches, seawalls, and marine activity together are, again, greater than each of the parts. So this comes from the Guilford Plan of Conservation and Development. In addition to that, the guidance document for low-impact development best management practices for Guilford, effective March of 2010, outlines strategies that strive to inflict minimal changes to the environment with no increase in stormwater runoff. And I realize that those guidelines generally apply to subdevelopments, but I think they are in keeping with the general feeling and the general statements that Guilford has made about treatment of its natural resources. So, as I said, I was here last time, I spoke, I read a letter, you have the letter, and I just want to say that we reiterate our objections in that letter, and we maintain that you should deny this application based on 4 things. Number 1, the continued cumulative disruption that it would inflict on the natural resources of Little Harbor, including excavation for the piles and the conduit. The increase of impervious surfaces and stormwater runoff that will accelerate soil erosion and thus increase water and soil-sourced contaminants into the shared resource of Little Harbor, which affects the harbor itself, plus the habitat for shorebirds, fish, and shellfish. The negative alteration of the natural viewshed from the water, which I believe is covered by the statute that you're reviewing this application under. It's the viewshed from the water and the shared beaches of both the Wingate Association, the Little Harbor Association, as well as local and state residents who enjoy the shoreline from the Long Island Sound, and also violations of the Low Impact Development Best Practices Guideline.
And thank you. Anybody else would like to speak against this application?
Tony Marchese, resident of Guilford, Wingate Community, architect registered in the state of Connecticut. I'm opposed as well, and based on all the elements that you just heard recorded earlier from the previous speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to speak? Yes?
I forgot to mention something, I'm sorry. Do I have to stand up again?
You should, because they want to get you on camera.
All right, so last time, Cynthia Conrad presented a letter from our association, and I want to make sure that you understand the letter was signed by 10 members of our association, so 10 more people object to this development.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak in opposition to this application? Sure.
Mr. Chairman, John Bennett again. The standard under which you're reviewing this is whether there's a substantial impact on a coastal resource. And the fact is there isn't. This thing's going to be pinned in. If there needs to be a concrete conduit here, then we have to come back, and it's in the coastal area, we have to come back for another application. So nothing is going to happen here with respect to anything of that kind that's going to cause a problem. These things have separation between them. Water that hits them is going to drop off into to the earth below. These are just going to be piles. There's no foundation. There's going to be limited excavation. They're behind existing trees. It's the only place that makes sense if you want to not see them. Under the standard, this array is just not a substantial coastal impact, as Mr. Kroll has suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
You just made an incorrect statement.
Sure. And then this will be it.
Well, then we're going to have to let him respond if he disagrees.
That's
Well,
okay.
the area that he's talking about that will allow water to percolate through these things is 3/8 of an inch. between each of the panels. And I know some things about soil erosion, so I'm telling you that that's just an incorrect statement.
Okay. Commission, do we have anything at this point?
Well, as far as the stormwater...
We're not going to keep going back and forth all night, guys, so.
Right. Just to clarify, underneath the panels will be gravel, which will allow all the runoff to percolate into the ground.
Yeah, you said that last time.
Yes, I'd love a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, it's closed. Okay, so, somebody want to make a,
Revised agenda.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Okay. It's deliberation of our public hearing items. So, as far as my position, and
Well,
yes,
let's get a motion. I'll get a.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'll make a motion. Vote of the
Thanks,
Guilford
Bill.
Planning and Zoning Commission approve a coastal area management application for Myra Weissman at 117 Andrews Road, map 12, lot 114, for a solar array as shown on an application dated 11/1/17 and coastal site plan, property of Myra Weissman, prepared by Waldo and Associates dated October 20, 2017. This application is approved with the following conditions. Anything listed on Kevin McGee's letter that was in our file last time. This application is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the zoning code and is consistent with the coastal management policies of the state of Connecticut. All right, great.
second, all right, so we're going to move to a discussion. So, having watched, obviously, the tape, because I wasn't here on the first meeting, visiting the site today, which let me apologize because the gate was closed and I decided to walk around it because nobody answered the beep or whatever, so. We did, okay, so I was walking all around it, I went to where it was, so I spent about good 20, 25 minutes down there looking at everything to see, and, you know, what George said is the impact of this. For myself, I didn't see it as a detrimental impact compared to what's there and where it's going to be placed. I did check it from Phil's picture point of view. Thank you for providing that picture. Had to orient myself with it.
You wouldn't say it was a significant impact?
I would not. I would agree with George in this one, on these panels. Like I said, there's no foundation. It's minimal work. It's in what I seem to think would be, and I'm not a professional, but what I thought was the right area, so.
Did you enter those pictures in the record?
Weren't they entered earlier today in the record?
Thought they were.
Okay.
I think, Lisa, you
Okay.
entered them into.
Good. Yeah, that's fine. Good.
So that was mine. So Josh, anybody else?
I was up there prior, after the last hearing, about a week after I gazed at it from the road, a little bit from the beach. I did not take their invite to walk the property per se. It was not ideal weather either. But compared to, based on Mr. Young's plans also, and what we're trying to approve here, I'm good with it.
George, what's in this, when, I'm looking at the definition section of the camp section. It talks about view standards.
Talks about what?
View standards. And it talks about, we have to take into consideration, in addition, waterfront property shall be developed so that the design and relationship of the development of the waterfront as viewed from the water or the land is consistent with a waterfront setting. Does that apply to, okay,
What does that mean, Tom?
that's what,
Yeah, it's up to us to define what that means in our own heads. I
One
think,
explicit thing that we did in the zoning code when trying to deal with this is the specification of a view corridor,
yeah.
which requires that where there is a view from the road typically to the coastal resource, typically the water or the marsh, and somebody wants to build a house or add on to a house, they have to preserve that view corridor. The view corridor being defined as the setback area from the zoning, from the property line as specified in whatever zone the property is in. And that view corridor has to be maintained in an open condition, can't be landscaped or fenced, so that there is the preservation of some view of the resource from the public way. That's the one explicit way that we've tried to deal with this visual impact issue. Beyond that, you know, as I think Josh just said, it's qualitative.
I think what you're getting at is no matter how you cut it, if you look at, from Phil's picture to the water pictures looking back, when you're really going to see this is going to be looking directly at their property.
I'm not sure how much you're really going to see it with the landscaping. If it's down, snugged in behind the evergreens, and there are going to be additional ones planted,
Right, I mean, it's 2 feet off the ground.
I mean, it's easy to envision, you know, it being a huge thing that's very visible. I'm not sure it's really going to be that impactful from a visual standpoint.
Right.
So, you know, compared to the scope of the entire change, this is very, very minor. But I think that a lot of folks are upset about the change that took place. You know, this gentleman wanted us to consider whether this tips the scale, or someone said about tipping the scale.
Yep.
And so, you know, to me, I've heard from the last meeting and then this meeting too, that this is a significant change that's not in keeping with what folks think should be on the shoreline. And so that's not what's before us right now. What's before us right now is a minor, little, tiny thing. And does it tip the scale? It doesn't even come close to tipping the scales. But, you know, the Weitzmans came here and asked permission for this grand house. And they bought the property, and they put the money into building the house. They did everything by the book. Not once did they cheat. They didn't bend the rules, nothing. When they wanted to do the work on the little cottage, they were here asking. They had people talking about where the walls could be. It wasn't like out of the blue, all this happened. All this was public noticed meetings. It was in the paper. We put it in the paper. We said, these folks are planning on doing this. Do you want to come to our meeting? Do you want to have input? Do you want to tell us before they build the house that this is a bad idea? And no one came. And now that the house is built, and now people are upset, now the Weitzmans want to put a little tiny solar collector. And everyone it seems, people that are angry about it are angry about the big house. And that's already been approved. That's not before us right now. What's before us right now is this solar array. And I can find no reason to say no. Counsel for the applicant is an officer of the court. He's not going to make up stuff as he goes along. He has a reputation to speak the truth. We receive what he says as the truth, and we believe him just as what you say we believe. So he cited case law. We are bound by case law. We have to follow what happened in cases that were like this in the past. That's part of what we do. But even so, this is so minor, and it's tucked behind the trees. I understand where you're coming from. It used to be a forest. It used to be beautiful. It was a little house. It was minor. Now it's grand. It's gigantic. And to me, it speaks about the old Guilford and the new Guilford, and as it's changing. And I hear where you're coming from. Who owns this town? Who decides what this town looks like? Does it belong to the individual property owner, or does it belong to everybody in town? And do we all make a decision about what their property should look like? And that's why we're here. That's why we sit here. This is a terrible position in places like this. I know you don't want that house there. I hear you. I feel you. We're not deciding that now. That got decided a year ago. What we're deciding right now is the solar array. And I don't know where I would have come from if you were here a year ago or 2 years ago when they were asking about that. I'm part of the new Guilford. I moved here 20 years ago. I wasn't here 50 years ago to see it the way it was. And I don't always understand why we want to keep things a certain way, when to me, some change is good. Change is inevitable. We want to manage the change. And from your opinion, I hear where you're coming from. This change was not managed as tightly as it could have been. But we put it in the paper. We told everyone what's before us. You heard the secretary, there was no notice this week, but last week he read the notices. Everything we do is in the paper. And now that that's done, it's changed. This minor little thing that's before us, it's so small. It's not impactful. So aside from, even if it were impactful, and if it were something that we would have to really mull over, prior case law has determined that we cannot consider what it looks like from the water. And even if we did consider that, even if we took that to heart, it's behind some trees and it's slowed down. I hear where you're coming from about increased runoff. I do. And so in our first meeting, our Kevin McGee, who is in charge of making sure that we don't screw up and damage the environment, I asked him specifically, what about the runoff? And he said they're putting gravel under this to control the speed, the velocity of the water coming off it so it doesn't erode the land. So I thought of what you were thinking in the last meeting I asked about it. It's not like I haven't thought about that too. Our staff is 100% on board. George is saying it's not a major impact. Kevin McGee said it's not going to have environmental hit. Counsel for the applicant is saying we can't consider the view from the water, but even if we take it into account, some people will tell you that solar panels are beautiful because they are a sign that someone's being a good steward of the environment and harvesting power in an environmentally safe way. If we wanted to consider that they were terrible looking, the gateway to Guilford, the thing that people see first when they come off the highway, is right in front of Bishop's, is that huge field of solar array. It's gigantic. It's bigger than, it's acres and acres of solar panels. And we thought it was good to put that right at the gateway to our town. That's the first thing people see. How can we say that an overwhelming installation of acres of solar panels is good at the gateway of our town, and then a 24 by 30 foot panel tucked behind some trees up against some rocks is bad? So I'm having a hard time coming up with reasons why I don't support this. That's my feelings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm not entirely certain that the case, the case law presented would apply. I'm not certain that I know what Branford statute said, where the regulations said, we're the sole arbitrators of reading our regs and applying them to these situations, and then the Superior Court can decide that we violated the law if that is the case. I don't fully understand what this definition section means, George. The view standards, and that's where I'm sort of hung up, because if we're going to take into consideration from the ocean, I mean, we have not really received any testimony that there would be any obstructed view if you look at it from the ocean.
Well, our regulation clearly says that you can consider that.
You can't.
You can't.
Cannot.
The section you just read.
It says we cannot.
I'm sorry, what were you reading?
It says that, in addition, waterfront property shall be developed so that the design and relation of the development to the waterfront as viewed from the water or the land is consistent with a waterfront setting. Yeah.
Well, they're talking about the coastal area, right? Not necessarily somebody's property.
I'm not sure what that is
Yeah,
actually.
I'm just saying, I don't really fully understand what that's, and I can't imagine that Branford has the same language, because.
It's pretty not specific.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Where you weighing on it then?
I don't know.
Okay.
I probably will know.
Okay. Phil, you got anything?
Again, I'll reiterate that I think the positioning and having the evergreens in front of it, even if it was viewed directly, if the evergreens weren't there, I think it's a harder case, but I think it's pretty low impact.
Mr. Brown?
Well, I listened to the last meeting before this one, and the thing I noticed that the people were saying the most was they're not happy with the house, period. That was their big complaint. And they certainly didn't like solar panels anyway, even though some people think they're wonderful. I can't say they look good anywhere. I mean, I know what they're doing, and they're a good thing what they're doing. But I don't think this is the case here. There's only one house I saw in that picture that could possibly view it at all, and they can't even view it. So they're below 2 feet. They're going to be hidden by material, and I can't see where I could vote against it, because I don't see it being a problem. I know the pain you feel looking at that, because I saw the picture of the way it looked before they built the house. So I understand how the people feel in that area, okay? But like you said, they did it by the rules, and we had a chance to come in and say our piece, and we didn't. So to come in and complain about it now and say that this solar panel is going to be an obstruction to something that's going to be bad for their view when they're going by in a rowboat, it doesn't sound logical to me. You can't see it, and I feel the pain that you have to look at that, and if you looked at it before. but that's nothing we have, that we control, so I can't vote against it.
Thanks, Alan. You weighed in, you did. All right, so I think we're all set to call the vote. All in favor? All opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, let's keep going, guys. We have some mandatory referral.
You got my elbow.
Tabled this, you recall that you needed some more information about what was actually being proposed. I did make a copy for everybody of the Section 8-24, the text of the law, not that that really sheds very much light on this issue. We also have an expert here representing the town and the project. I'll let him introduce himself and explain what this is actually all about and try to answer any questions you might have.
This is $9.5 million. Name and address for the record, please.
My name's Aldo Mazzaferro. I'm an engineer with the ECG Group, and we've been working with the town of Guilford for about 2 years now to develop what's called this energy performance contracting concept with Johnson Controls. They would be the ESCO contractor. ESCO is the term energy services company. They are the contractor responsible for building the project, implementing it, and guaranteeing the savings and performance of it. Our role in this is being kind of the owner's rep and overall engineer of record for the project, where we assisted the town, the standing building committee, Board of Selectmen through the procurement process of the ESCO contractor, the development of the project. And, you know, we've gone through various levels of approval with the standing building committee, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the Board of Education. And, you know, they've all approved it, they've voted it, so we're here seeking your approval for the project as well. Be happy to answer any questions, specific questions you might have about the project. Yes?
How long is the return on investment period on these improvements?
The overall is, off the top of my head, I believe it's 16 years, but that's a combination of quick payback measures, things that are in the 3, 4, 5-year range, something like an LED upgrade, and a cooling tower replacement, which is very little energy savings, but high capital cost. So together they mold into one self-funding project. So we don't necessarily use a return on investment metric to evaluate these projects, because we structure them in a way that the guaranteed savings cover the financing costs of the project. So the guaranteed savings by Johnson Controls is the revenue source that's offsetting the future principal or financing payments.
So our Board of Finance has looked at the numbers and determined that your numbers make sense to them. And so our role is just to say, yes, this is a good idea based on the fact that the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of everybody else said yes.
Right, how do we see it?
Yeah, we can't say
We
no,
really
because
can't
none
say
of us
no.
are that
Why
smart.
is this even in front of us?
Because it's mandatory referral, it has to be
Do you have
before
any
us.
equipment to measure, or?
Yeah, we put our-
That's where I could think we come in.
There's an extensive measurement and verification process where they're, right.
Legal counsel that advises the planning of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for the bonding of this project think that it's required under Section 8-24 that it be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a town property improvement that qualifies. You can read this statute. It doesn't tell you what criteria you use in evaluating whether this is to be approved or not. If you don't approve it, if you don't do anything, it's approved. It's automatically approved after 35 days. If you vote no, then it requires a 2/3 vote of the Board of Selectmen to approve it. There's really very little criteria that you use to evaluate these things.
Why did they just wait the 35 days?
Well,
I don't
they
think
didn't.
I can answer that question.
Go ahead.
Part of it is actually relevant to tonight, part of the scope is solar panels that are going on the roof of, you know, the new high school. It's a flat roof, you put them on there. Part of the solar economics is what's called a renewable energy credit, or REC, that the state of Connecticut offers. We bid into the open market. It's a bidding process throughout the state of Connecticut. The town received or is granted these $ per kilowatt hour generated by the solar array. If the solar arrays are not connected by April, of this coming year, you begin to lose those rebates for every day that the solar array is not connected. So we're really kind of at the, if we don't get the notice to proceed in the next week or so, I would really put it at doubt that we would actually get to that point where we'd be able to design and connect these systems. Yes.
Is it reasonable that the high school would have been built without solar panels on it? I mean, it was only built 2 years ago.
This has been a large topic of discussion, just because of the relevance of the brand-new high school is being built. It does make sense. We've been doing, my company ourselves, we've done energy performance contracts for the last 15 years, probably for everything leading up to the last 2 years, maybe 3 years or so. The only solar that we did was small educational type systems, little 5 kW, similar in size to what you were just looking at, kind of like for curriculum enhancement, things like that at a school. In recent years, the solar panel costs have dropped significantly. The panels' efficiency have increased. The rebate programs are much more lucrative. So it would make sense that at that time when that high school was being built, it really didn't make a lot of sense, and it would have taken money away from that budget for other things you might have wanted to do there. But today, now that the industry has matured a little more, it's very economical to do so in the high school.
Good answer.
Thank
It's
you.
perfect. I like it. Good job.
All right, we got $9.5 million here. Will be completed by the Board of Education side as well as the town side. That's both our money. That's our money from the Board of Education, our money from the town. So we're basically paying for it. I don't know why that was written that way. In any case, it says here also, the energy savings realized from the project over a 20-year life of the agreement will be used to pay for the cost occurred.
Right.
Does that mean it's going to take 20 years to get our money back, or is this thing going to pay itself off in 5 years? Are we
No.
going to end up with a profit from having this thing or not?
You do end up with a profit at the end of it, because the equipment, from year one, you'll have excess positive cash flow. Year one, you will have, say, $500,000 in savings with $495,000 in debt service payments or financing payments. So year one, you have an excess cash flow. Plus, in addition to that, you've gotten the cooling tower done, boiler upgrades, window replacements, real capital items that the town has to pay for one way or the other. The way to think about this project, it's a funding source to address capital items, not necessarily a energy savings initiative, because you're reinvesting those energy savings and paying for documented building needs. Does that make sense?
Yes. Please read it.
Voted the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a mandatory referral, CGS 8-24, for energy improvements as described in a letter from the first selectman dated December 18th, 2017.
Second. Okay, we discussed it at length. I think we're good. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstaining? No, we're good. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for the
Thank
time.
you.
Rich, how do you like those minutes?
Well, we did have to make one little change. There was a misspelling of Chris Anderhagen's name. It's been corrected. And with that change, I'm 100% on board. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you. So I make a motion to approve the minutes because they're substantially correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
You weren't here, bud.
I wasn't here. Yeah, oh, yeah.
All right, I think that's it.
Mr. Chairman,
Seeing that.
make a motion that we close the meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. And girls.
Thank you.